Right, so are you ready to explore how to become a better explainer, especially as a teacher?
Sounds like a plan.
Perfect. Well, we're diving deep today into a classic,
Okay.
Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Ah,
You're
interesting.
using the revised edition.
Okay.
And, I was struck by how many of these stories still resonate today. So before we get to the good stuff,
Sure.
can you give us some context on who Carnegie was and what he was trying to do with this book?
Yeah, so back in the 1930s,
Okay.
Dale Carnegie was teaching public speaking and human relations.
Oh, wow.
This book actually came out of those courses.
Interesting.
He had this idea that being able to connect with people
Okay.
was even more important than being a great speaker.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense when you think about teaching,
Right.
because that connection between a teacher and student is really what makes the learning happen.
Exactly. It's crucial.
So how did Carnegie come up with these principles?
Well, he was a researcher at Hark.
Okay.
I mean, he spent years reading biographies of successful people, interviewing them,
Wow.
trying to understand what made them tip.
So he wasn't just sharing opinions.
Not at all.
He actually did his homework.
Oh, he did his research.
Okay, good to know.
He was trying to find these fundamental principles of human interaction.
That's why this book is still so relevant today, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not just feel-good advice.
Nope.
It's actually based on real insights about human nature.
Absolutely. And those principles apply just as much in the classroom as anywhere else.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Yeah.
What's one of the most important things Carnegie talks about?
Well, one of the most powerful ideas is to steer clear of arguments.
Avoid arguments.
Yeah, he actually tells this great story
Okay.
about a London banquet
Okay.
where someone misquoted Shakespeare.
Uh-oh.
And Carnegie, the meticulous researcher that he was, he corrected the guy.
I can only imagine.
And even though Carnegie was technically right,
Mm-hmm.
he realized afterwards that winning the argument cost him something much more valuable:
What was that?
the goodwill of the other person.
Oh, that's a tough lesson.
It is.
But it's so important for teachers.
Absolutely.
It's so easy to get caught up in being right.
Yeah.
Correcting every little mistake,
Right.
winning every debate.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that can damage your relationship with a student.
Exactly. It can create a barrier.
And that's the opposite of what we want.
Right. We want to build bridges, not walls.
So instead of arguing, what should teachers do?
Well, Carnegie believed in seeing things from the other person's perspective.
Okay, empathy.
Exactly. That ability to step into someone else's shoes is crucial for any relationship.
And for getting your point across effectively.
Right.
Does Carnegie have any good stories about this?
He does. He tells one about a lumber inspector
Okay.
who found himself in a tough spot with a client.
Uh-oh.
Instead of getting defensive,
Yeah.
he took a moment to acknowledge the client's frustration
Okay.
and admitted that he had made a mistake.
Wow, that takes courage,
It does.
especially in a professional setting.
Right. But it also shows humility
Yeah.
and a willingness to learn.
And in that story,
Yeah.
did it work?
The client's anger just melted away.
So just by admitting he was wrong?
Yeah, the inspector completely changed the dynamic.
Interesting.
Can you imagine the impact a teacher could have
Yeah.
by modeling that same kind of accountability and empathy in the classroom?
It's about creating that safe space for learning.
Yes.
Where students know it's okay to make mistakes.
Exactly. They won't be judged or ridiculed.
Now, speaking of creating a positive learning environment,
Yeah.
Carnegie also talks about the importance of praise and encouragement.
Yes, he believed that recognizing people's efforts and accomplishments, even small ones, can be incredibly motivating.
It's not about giving empty compliments, though.
No, it's about acknowledging real progress and effort,
Right.
recognizing their unique strengths.
So how do we do this in the classroom?
Well, there's this amazing story about Charles Schwab, the steel magnate.
Okay.
He wanted to boost productivity at one of his mills.
Okay.
So he walked in at the end of the day shift and wrote the number 10 on the factory floor.
Just the number 10.
Yep.
What was that supposed to do?
Well, the night shift saw that number and knew the day shift had produced 10 units.
I see.
They were instantly motivated to beat that number, and they did.
So it was like a challenge.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's a brilliant example of how even a simple act of acknowledging effort can spark that competitive spirit.
And drive people to achieve more.
Exactly.
It seems like this could be really useful in teaching.
It can be.
Setting clear goals, recognizing progress, creating that culture where everyone feels supported and encouraged.
Absolutely. And it's about recognizing that everyone has their own unique talents and strengths.
Not just what they achieve academically.
Exactly.
It's about making students feel valued for who they are.
Precisely. And this leads us to another important principle:
Okay.
the importance of continuous learning and growth.
So it's not just about teachers mastering their subject.
Right.
It's also about constantly looking for ways to improve their teaching skills.
Yes. And to connect better with their students.
How does Carnegie illustrate this?
He tells this delightful story
Okay.
about his childhood dog, Tippy.
Oh, I love dog
So
stories.
Tippy would wait for Carnegie every day after school,
Okay.
his tail wagging with pure joy.
That's adorable.
It is.
So what's the lesson here?
It's about genuine interest and enthusiasm.
I see.
Tippy wasn't faking it.
Yeah.
He was expressing pure, unadulterated joy.
And that kind of enthusiasm
Yeah.
is contagious.
Absolutely.
Like a teacher who's truly passionate about their subject.
Exactly.
That passion spills over into the classroom.
It can be transformative.
It can inspire students in a way that no textbook ever could.
Right. It's like a spark that ignites a fire.
Okay, so genuine enthusiasm.
Yes. And Carnegie also mentions Howard Thurston, the famous
Oh, yeah.
magician, who always said, "I love my audience" before every performance.
That's interesting.
You'd think a magician would want to be mysterious.
Right.
But Thurston understood that connecting with his audience on a human level
Yeah.
was essential to creating a truly magical experience.
It's a great reminder that even when we're explaining complex ideas, a little bit of heart can go a long way.
Absolutely.
It's about letting students know you're not just there to deliver information.
Right.
You genuinely care about their understanding.
You care about them as people.
Okay, so we've got genuine enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And we've got showing that you care.
Mm-hmm.
What else is important?
Well, Carnegie emphasizes something that might seem small,
Okay,
but can make a huge difference.
what's that?
Remembering and using people's names?
Oh, yeah, he dedicates a whole chapter to that.
He does, and he tells this incredible story
Okay.
about Jim Farley, a political strategist
Oh.
who was legendary for his ability to remember names.
Wow.
Farley believed it was key to building relationships and fostering loyalty.
It makes people feel seen
Exactly.
and heard.
To salute.
So for teachers,
Yeah,
imagine remembering each student's name.
especially in a large class.
Right.
It shows them that you see them as individuals,
Yeah.
not just faces in a crowd.
Says you matter.
Exactly.
Your presence here is noticed.
It's a small act that can have a profound impact on the learning environment.
Okay, so we've talked about avoiding arguments, seeing things from the student's perspective, praising effort, being enthusiastic, remembering names.
It's a good start.
What other gems does Carnegie have for us?
Okay, well, one of my favorite principles is letting the other person do a great deal of the talking.
Make them feel important.
Yeah, exactly. It goes back to that idea of remembering names, making people feel valued.
Okay.
Carnegie tells this funny story about a dinner party.
Okay.
He ends up sitting next to this botanist,
Okay.
and he admits he knows nothing about plants.
Uh-huh.
But instead of trying to fake it, he just
Yeah.
listens intently to the botanist talk about his work.
And I bet the botanist loved it.
Oh, absolutely. He probably thought Carnegie was the most fascinating guy.
Exactly.
And Carnegie's point is that by actively listening, by giving someone our full attention, we make them feel heard and respected.
And that's gold for teachers.
It is.
When students feel like their voices matter,
Yeah,
they're much more engaged in the learning.
absolutely. It creates this dynamic where the teacher isn't just lecturing, but they're facilitating a conversation.
Right.
It becomes this shared exploration of ideas.
It's about creating that classroom where everyone feels comfortable,
Yes.
sharing their thoughts and questions.
Exactly. Now, to build on that,
Okay.
Carnegie suggests letting the other person feel that the idea is there.
So not just listening to them,
Right.
but actually guiding them towards discovering the answer themselves.
That's the idea. It's not about forcing your ideas on someone.
Okay.
It's about making them feel like they came up with the solution.
Like it was their own brilliant idea?
Exactly. And he tells this fascinating story
Okay.
about Colonel Edward McHouse,
Okay.
who was a close advisor to President Woodrow Wilson.
Okay.
Wilson was considering this big diplomatic move,
Okay.
and House, knowing Wilson's personality very well,
Mm-hmm.
subtly planted the idea as if it was Wilson's own.
Oh, wow, that's clever.
It is.
So Wilson felt like it was his own idea.
Exactly, and he embraced it wholeheartedly.
Wow, so it's influencing without controlling.
Yes, leading by empowering.
I could see how this could be powerful in teaching.
It can be.
Instead of just giving students the answers,
Yeah,
you could ask leading questions,
right.
nudge them in the right direction,
Exactly.
and then let them experience the joy of figuring things out for themselves.
It's about nurturing that sense of agency, that
Yeah.
aha moment when a concept clicks into place.
That's the best feeling.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about listening,
Yeah.
making people feel heard.
Mm. Guiding them toward their own discoveries.
What other strategies does Carnegie recommend?
Well, this might sound obvious, but
Uh,
he emphasizes the importance of actually being interested in what you're talking about.
Also, genuine enthusiasm.
Exactly. It goes back to that story about Carnegie's dog Tippy,
Yeah,
that pure joy.
right.
It's contagious.
I think that's one of the most important qualities a teacher can have.
I agree.
If you're not excited about the subject,
Yeah.
How can you expect your students to be?
Exactly. And it's not just about the subject matter itself.
Okay.
It's about being genuinely interested in your students,
Yeah.
in their perspectives, in their learning journeys.
So seeing things from the student's perspective.
Right. And that leads us to another important point.
Okay.
Appealing to their nobler motives.
Nobler motive.
Carnegie believes that most people want to do the right thing.
Okay.
They want to feel good about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So by appealing to those nobler motives,
Okay.
their sense of fairness,
Yeah.
justice, compassion,
Okay.
you can inspire them to act in ways that align with your goals.
So it's about appealing to their better nature.
Exactly. He gives that great example of the debt collector
Okay.
who, instead of being harsh,
Yeah.
appealed to the customer's sense of fairness
Okay.
and ended up getting paid more than he was owed.
Wow, so it actually worked in his favor.
It did, and a teacher could use this principle
Yeah.
to create a more collaborative and supportive learning environment.
Okay, how so?
Instead of just focusing on grades and competition,
Right.
you encourage students to help each other,
Okay.
contribute to the classroom community,
Mm-hmm.
strive for excellence for the sake of learning and growth.
So not just for the reward.
Exactly. It's about tapping into that intrinsic motivation.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, another powerful technique Carnegie discusses is dramatization.
Dramatization.
He argues that simply stating facts
Yeah.
isn't enough.
Okay.
You have to make them vivid,
Mm-hmm.
memorable,
Go tell it.
tell a story.
So bring it to life.
Exactly. He uses the example of a company trying to promote their newspaper.
Okay.
Instead of just listing the number of pages or articles, they created this giant physical display
Okay.
showing the sheer volume of content.
Oh, wow.
It was a way to make the value proposition tangible,
Okay.
create an experience,
Right.
not just present information.
So how can teachers use this?
Well, you could use visuals,
Okay.
create interactive activities, tell stories,
Okay.
anything to make the learning come alive.
So engage multiple senses.
Yes, appeal to emotions,
Okay.
make the learning process more active.
And engaging.
Exactly.
Now, Carnegie also talks about handling criticism, right?
He does.
What does he say about that?
He stresses the importance of starting with praise
Okay.
before pointing out areas for improvement.
So start with the positive.
Exactly. He tells this funny story about President Calvin Coolidge.
Okay, I love Calvin Coolidge's story.
Known for his dry wit,
Yeah.
Coolidge called his secretary into his office
Okay.
and praised her excellent work,
Okay.
specifically her impeccable punctuation.
Oh, nice.
But then being Coolidge,
Geez, say.
don't get stuck up. I just said that to make you feel good from now on. I wish you would be a little bit more careful with your punctuation.
Oh, Calvin Coolidge.
It's a humorous anecdote, but it
Mhm.
highlights an important point.
What's that?
Criticism is much easier to swallow when it's sandwiched between genuine praise and encouragement.
So it's all about the delivery.
It is.
As a teacher.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance.
Yes.
Acknowledging a student's strengths
Mhm.
and helping them identify areas for growth.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of feedback
Yeah.
where students feel supported,
Yeah.
not just corrected.
And speaking of supporting students,
Yeah.
Carnegie tells that powerful story about Abraham Lincoln
Oh, yes.
and his ability to handle difficult people.
Mm-hmm.
He had that General Joseph Hooker,
Right.
who was a brilliant,
Yes.
but also very egotistical.
Yeah, and critical of Lincoln.
So what did Lincoln do?
Instead of firing Hooker
Okay.
or publicly reprimanding him,
Mm-hmm.
Lincoln wrote him this thoughtful letter.
Wow.
He started by praising Hooker's talents and contributions,
Okay.
then gently pointed out some areas for improvement.
It's like the compliment sandwich,
I know.
but with much hotter stakes.
Yeah. Did it work?
It did. Hooker became much more receptive to Lincoln's guidance after reading that letter.
So leading with empathy and understanding can be more effective
It often is.
than anger or punishment.
It's a good reminder that every student is a complex individual.
Yeah.
And sometimes those challenging behaviors are a reflection of unmet needs or struggles.
It's about seeing the human being beneath the behavior.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key point.
Okay, what about?
Giving people a fine reputation to live up to.
Oh, I like that.
Carnegie argues that when we express confidence in someone,
Yeah.
when we believe in their potential,
Mm-hmm.
they're more likely to rise to the occasion. It's like that saying, treat a man as he is, and he will remain as he is. Treat a man as he can and should be, and he will become as he can and should be.
Exactly.
Do you have an example for this one?
I do. Carnegie tells a story about a manager
Okay.
struggling with an employee who's making a lot of mistake.
Okay.
Instead of yelling at the employee,
Yeah.
the manager calls him in and says,
Okay, what does he say?
"You're a valuable member of this team, and I know you're capable of great work. I have faith in you."
Wow, what a difference that must have made.
It did. The employee started performing at a much higher level.
So just by expressing confidence in him.
Yeah, sometimes the best way to motivate someone isn't to criticize their weaknesses, but to acknowledge their strengths and give them a reputation to live up to.
And Carnegie also emphasizes praising even the slightest improvement.
He does. He tells a story about a young boy struggling to learn the piano.
Oh, I can relate to that.
His father was getting frustrated, but his mother,
Okay.
she kept praising the boy's efforts and pointing out every little improvement.
That's so important.
It is, and that boy grew up to be Enrico Caruso.
No way.
One of the most famous opera singers of all time.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's a beautiful example of how encouragement can go such a long way.
Yeah, as a teacher, it's about noticing and celebrating those small victories.
Yes, those incremental steps towards mastery.
It's about creating a culture of growth.
Exactly.
Where mistakes are seen as opportunities.
Yes.
Not failures.
That's the key.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Carnegie offers so much practical wisdom for teachers.
He does, and while we've only scratched the surface, I think we've touched on some of the most important principles for building strong relationships, fostering a positive learning environment, and inspiring students to reach their full potential.
Yeah, it's amazing how relevant his work still is.
It really is, almost a century later.
It's like he tapped into something timeless about human nature.
Yeah, the fundamentals haven't changed, you know?
Exactly. So as we wrap up,
okay,
what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners will remember?
If I had to pick just one,
Okay.
I'd say it's that mindset of genuine human connection.
Okay.
Approaching teaching from that place, of really seeing our students as individuals,
Yeah.
valuing their perspectives,
Okay.
recognizing their potential.
So it's never about tricks or techniques.
No, not really.
It's about that genuine empathy.
Exactly.
And when we teach from that place of connection, we could create that safe space for learning.
Yes, where students feel comfortable exploring, making mistakes.
Yeah.
Growing.
That's where the magic happens.
It really is.
So for you, our listener, as you continue on your journey as an educator, remember that explaining effectively is about more than just conveying information.
It's so much more.
It's about fostering curiosity.
Yeah.
Building relationships.
Absolutely.
Inspiring a love of learning, embrace that power of human connection, and watch your students thrive.
I love that.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Keep exploring, keep connecting.
Keep diving deep.
Keep explaining. Again,